Hi guys, this is Erica from Gokce Capital. Now before I begin, be sure to click subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Olaf Arvid Nelson, the mighty Swede, lay dying. He doesn't complain, but his thoughts must be dark, for he had just staked the Gold King claim on Colorado's Bonita Peak, and now would never make it pay. Yet though Olaf would not see it, the Gold King mine was destined to bring both profit and tragedy to thousands. But more on that later. For first, there are scores of sites like the Gold King mine around the country, which is why you should understand how the Superfund program works. And in today's video, we have the top things you need to know. Number 1, what is Superfund? Superfund is the informal name for CERCLA, or the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. Congress established CERCLA in 1980 to clean up thousands of contaminated sites identified across the country. The act forces the parties responsible for the contamination to either perform cleanup or reimburse the government for EPA-led remediation work. If there isn't a viable responsible party, then Superfund gives the EPA both the funding and authority to clean up contaminated sites. Number 2, where can I find a list of Superfund sites? You can go to the EPA's website and search for Superfunds by state and county. Number 3, how does the Superfund cleanup process work? Potentially contaminated sites are first assessed to understand what contaminants are in place and how bad the contamination is. With community approval, a site is then placed on the national priorities list. Responsible contaminating parties are identified, a remediation plan is produced, and then remediation work is completed. After the bulk of the work is completed, the site is monitored to ensure there is no leakage, and once it is determined that the site poses no future harm, the site is removed from the national priorities list. Number 4, why is the Superfund program important? Living near open toxic waste comes with both irreversible and long-lasting health effects. Unfortunately, these health effects impact children more than they do adults. Thus, when children live near Superfund sites, they are more prone to birth defects, childhood cancer, decreased cognitive functioning, and various behavioral problems. In addition, many of these sites are large enough and contaminated enough to require significant time and expenditures to clean. This is why federal oversight and funding is so important in making sure these most toxic of areas are appropriately remediated. And number 5, what are the problems with the Superfund program? While the Superfund program has had many successes, it hasn't always lived up to its potential. Perhaps the primary criticism of the Superfund program is that it has been slow. There are thousands of identified Superfund sites, yet only a few hundred have been cleaned. In addition, because the process, or perhaps the very nature of environmental cleanup, is highly litigious, much money has been spent on lawyers and administrative costs. So yes, the Superfund program is far from perfect, but it is still one of the most effective tools we have to clean up large-scale environmental disasters. Which brings me back to the Gold King mine. After Olaf finished dying in his hut near Silverton, Colorado, his widow sold the Gold King claim to 3 investors who transformed the original mineral outcropping into a flourishing mine. For years, the Gold King mine and many others brought prosperity to San Juan County and Silverton. Yet, by 1953, the good times were gone, and all but one of the region's mines had shuttered. Still, all was not quiet. The mine's old entrances and passageways continued to belch toxic water that slowly drained into the nearby rivers. And when the last mine closed in 1991, the region had become the largest untreated mine drainage in the state. Thus, it was not long before the Colorado Health Department began to poke around, which made many Silverton residents nervous. Most people in Silverton were still hopeful that the mining industry could be restored, And the last thing they wanted was for the mines to be labeled an environmental hazard, or even worse, a Superfund site. With strong opposition to government action, the state agreed to help a local organization, the Animas River Stakeholders Group, clean up the area themselves. With state and federal funding, they tackled a number of projects and coordinated with Sunnyside Gold, the last operator in the area, to plug the remaining company-owned mines. At the time, the Gold King mine was technically dry, its water draining into the American Tunnel directly below. Yet the American Tunnel was one of the Sunnyside mines that contributed to acid mine drainage in the area. So in July 1996, Sunnyside employees screwed shut the valve on a concrete plug, cutting off the American Tunnel's stream of toxic water. Water quality began to improve, and for a time it seemed the combined efforts of Sunnyside and the stakeholders had paid off. But in the early 2000s, tainted water started to pour out of the Gold King. By 2005, it was one of the worst polluters in the state. Water quality dropped, fish died in the nearby river, and the stakeholders were at a loss for what to do. They knew the Gold King mine was filling up with water trapped by the American Tunnel bulkheads, but had no idea where precisely in the old complex the water came. The most logical solution was a water treatment plant, but the cost was too great for the group to shoulder. Thus, in late July 2015, EPA crews showed up at the entrance of the Gold King mine to evaluate the problem. What they found was concerning. You see, a few years ago, the Gold King mine's tunnel had partially collapsed, creating a dam behind which the acid mine drainage backed up. By the summer of 2015, the water had risen high enough to raise concerns about a blowout. The EPA's on-scene coordinator was sufficiently worried by the water pressure on the other side of the sealed entrance that he postponed treatment work on the mine until further studies could accurately determine the water depth and pressure it exerted on the entrance plug. But then, in early August, he went on vacation, and his replacement ordered the EPA to clear dirt from the tunnel entrance and install a drainage pipe. On August 5th, at around 10:30 a.m., a thin stream of water spurted out of the entrance, growing steadily into a fountain, and finally a rolling torrent of thick, tang-colored water. As the workers looked on, the mine entrance blew, and metal-laden water roared out, crashing into Cement Creek far below. By the end of the day, 3 million gallons of contaminated water had made its way into the Animas River, turning it bright orange. Fortunately, the Animas River did not appear to be too adversely impacted, but the shock of the orange-colored water incited a level of vitriol that the region had not seen before. However, before you assume that the point of this story is to call out the ineffectiveness of the EPA, let's dig a bit deeper. Yes, the EPA caused the immediate spill, but many experts believe the blowout would likely have occurred on its own. For in the end, the problem of toxic drainage from the complex web of tunnels in the Bonita Peak area had proven too difficult for either the private sector, civil society, or the local government to permanently solve. And in the wake of this spill, the town of Silverton and the San Juan County Commissioners voted unanimously to request Superfund designation for the area. But even with the influx of money that the Superfund designation and settlements over the spill have brought, it will be years before the region's waters are restored. After all, the Gold King mine blowout was the easy part of the cleanup. The hard part will be the remediation of the nearly 50 mining sites in the region that leak toxic water on a regular basis. So perhaps the true takeaway here is a note of caution. A reminder that we should never be so entranced by the promise of profit that we disregard the harm our actions will cause to future generations. For once an area has been contaminated, it can be a Herculean task for any organization, whether government or private, to clean. But what do you think? Do you have any stories about Superfund sites? Let us know in the comments. Did you like this video? You're going to love our Gokce Land Due Diligence program. We'll make you a land due diligence expert in just 7 days. Check it out at gokcecapital.com/glad. And while you're at our website, don't forget to explore our $1 down listings at gokcecapital.com/listings. Finally, don't hesitate to reach out. You can email, call, or text, and we will respond as soon as possible. So thank you for listening, and more to come.